Howdy, it's Liz again, and I just wanted to show you a little project that I had been working on. I had been turning it over in my mind. I don't know about you, but I have a lot of trims left over. I have almost a shoebox full of little strips. Some of them come off scrapbook paper that I'm using, and I think, oh, there's something nice on it. I'll throw it in the box, and I have a whole shoebox full. And they're generally about the same width because they have the same amount on the scrapbook paper. This one is huge, this one is unusual, but it's usually a little less than, or sometimes a half of an inch. This one's a little bit less, this one's a half, this one's more. And I was thinking to myself, I gotta find a use for these. And I was mulling it over, and I remembered back to my quilting days, where you're making little quilt blocks out of strips. There's a block called a log cabin block, and it's usually much bigger than this, but it has a central square, which is usually either red or yellow, and then you pile on strips of fabric on the outside and build the pattern up from the center. So I thought, I'm going to try doing that. And then I took a Project Life card that I had, and I cut it 2 inches by 2 inches and started there. I found some papers that I had a little piece of, and I glued it down with some Fabri-Tac, and then I started sort of roughly cutting my strips to measure and gluing them down and cutting them off, and gluing them down and cutting them off, and gluing them down, cutting them off. And this is actually an optical illusion in this corner, which is a little bit thicker. There are 3 layers here because I started the first one here and went this way, and I ended the last one on top of this one. So I thought, okay, that's not hideous. So I made another 3 or 4 and decided that what it actually needed was some sewing on it. So I got out the sewing machine, and I should have thought this through before I started and figured out where I was going to sew. And if I bring this up to the camera pretty closely, it will focus on it. You see that's some pretty disorganized stitching because I stopped and I started, and then I went back and I did the little bits here. And so then I decided the easiest thing to do would be to sew in a straight line, pick up the needle, sew in a straight line, sew in a straight line, sew in a straight line. If I thought about that beforehand, it would have been easier. And what I did was I got pretty good at pulling out a little bit of slack in the thread and holding my finger here to keep it out of the way of the next batch of stitches. So you see that each of these corners has a loop where I sewed it from here to here, and then I pulled the threads out of the way. Actually, that would be backwards. I sewed it from here to here, pulled the threads out of the way, sewed it from here to here, pulled the threads out of the way, sewed it from there to there. So I'm doing 4 straight runs here, and I just need to trim the threads off. So that was pretty easy. So here's what they look like after you cut the threads off. They're pretty cute. I like them. So here's an itty bitty little craft that uses up some scraps. You'll see that it only uses up, 2 inches at a time, so I still have a whole shoebox full. But I thought, it's a little bit fussy. I can probably make it a little faster. So I took some paper, okay? See the paper? And then I glued the strips onto the paper. This is another quilting technique here. You sew your strips together and then you cut them into pieces. So you're making small pieces into big pieces. And I took one piece of paper and I did a couple coordinating rows of strips, and then I cut the paper apart. And then I took these and made it even easier on myself and sewed in long straight lines between the strips. And in reflection, I probably shouldn't have sewn this outside edge here because I had to cut the paper here when I used a piece of this and pull these stitches out. And you'll see in a minute that when I used this, I actually sewed it down. So anyway, I have a couple of rows of strips that are ready to be made into other things. A couple of different colors depending on what I had. I'm pretty close in here so that you can see the really small stuff. So then I took some and I took a strip. See those? 4. I cut a strip that's about a little over an inch, and then I put 2 additional strips on the edges that coordinate. And this went a little bit faster because instead of gluing fiddly little bits all the way along here, you were gluing the much longer strips and then cutting the part. And to do this, I took this set of 4 strips and put it on another piece of paper. Now, they're heavier weight scrapbook papers. If I were going to do this again, instead of using the card for a base, I would use paper. If I'm using heavier weight scrapbook paper, if I'm using lighter weight scrapbook paper, I'd use the card. And the reason is that in this particular center section, I have these heavier cards and they're attached to a Project Life card, and then they're attached to a piece of paper, and that thickness does add up. So if I was going to do this, I wouldn't have used the Project Life card initially. That's the way it is. So I kind of liked that, and I thought these would be nice as paper clips. I had some trims from the Project Life cards. I could do these as the thinner paper clips. You could do larger sections. You could do tuck spots. So I thought they were cute. But then I thought, well, I should probably try to use one of these and make it as part of a larger project. So I made this with one of the blocks that I really liked. And you can see that this, if I do this, this is the original block. It has a blue center. It's got 2 blue and white pieces and 2 gold pieces. And I took just a piece of paper that I had folded over and glued down, and I picked some letters that coordinated and a couple of pieces of actual fabric, some lace trim, the buttons, and a little piece of embossed paper that I colored and I sewed around the edge. So this will get glued down into a book as a pocket, but it was a way to try to incorporate this little block into a larger piece. So that is my little experiment for today. I thought that they looked pretty good. I'm pretty pleased with them. I'll go back and I'll finish sewing the others and trim this baby up so that I can use it someplace else. Thank you so much for looking. Have a great day.